I never thought a joke could ruin my life. But that's exactly what happened, or at least, that's how it felt when I was standing in the principal's office, my future hanging by a thread, all because of my brother's dumb idea. Let me back up. My name's Jake, and up until last week, I was a senior at Westwood High. I was on track to graduate with decent grades, a few solid friendships, and a reputation for being just the right amount of sarcastic. I wasn't a troublemaker. I wasn't a class clown. I was just a guy trying to make it through school without doing anything memorable enough to haunt me forever. Then my brother, Danny, came up with the joke. Now, Danny is 2 years younger than me, and if I had to describe him in one word, it would be relentless. He's the type of guy who sees life as one big prank war, and unfortunately, I've been his favorite target since birth. Usually, his jokes were harmless: plastic wrap over the toilet seat, changing my phone's language to Russian, convincing mom I'd joined an underground fight club, which got me grounded for a week before she realized he was lying. But this time, he went too far. It all started when Danny decided it would be hilarious if he pranked our school principal, Mr. Lawson. The man was the human embodiment of a rule book, strict, humorless, and completely incapable of taking a joke. He was the last person you wanted to mess with. Naturally, Danny saw this as a challenge. His plan? To send an email from my school account, which he somehow hacked into, and make it look like I was resigning from school. Not dropping out, resigning. Like I was some overworked CEO who had finally had enough of corporate politics. It was supposed to read: Dear Mr. Lawson, I regret to inform you that I can no longer continue my role as a student at Westwood High. The pressure has become unbearable, and I believe it is time for me to move on to greater things, like competitive gaming and learning how to make the perfect grilled cheese sandwich. Please consider this my official resignation. I appreciate all that you have taught me, which, admittedly, is not much. Best regards, Jake. Danny thought it was comedy gold. Me? I thought it was insanely stupid. Unfortunately, I found out about it too late. By the time I realized what Danny had done, the email had already been sent, and Mr. Lawson, being the humorless robot that he was, did not find it funny. Not even a little. Which is how I ended up in the principal's office, sitting across from him while he scrolled through my resignation letter with the dead-eyed stare of a man who had given up on today's youth. You think this is funny? He asked, his voice the exact temperature of an iceberg. I shook my head so fast I probably looked like I was having a seizure. No. I swear, I didn't write that. My brother, he got into my account and... I've heard a lot of excuses, Jake, Mr. Lawson interrupted. But blaming your little brother for a fabricated resignation letter? That's a new one. I groaned internally. Danny was dead. Dead. If I survived this, I was going to make sure he never saw the light of day again. Mr. Lawson sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. We take this kind of thing very seriously. Your email was inappropriate, disrespectful, and frankly, it raises concerns about whether or not you even want to be here. I did want to be there. More importantly, I needed to be there, because if I got kicked out, my parents would send me to live with my aunt, who was basically the human version of a vacuum cleaner, constantly hovering, always pulling you into something you didn't want to be involved in. Sir, I'm calling your parents, he said flatly. My stomach dropped. Oh, God. The phone call happened. My parents came in, and the situation went about as well as you'd expect. There was a lot of yelling. Some dramatic sighs. A few "where did we go wrong" comments. And then, the final verdict: I was expelled. Expelled. For a joke I didn't even make. The moment we got home, I stormed up to Danny's room. He was sitting on his bed, looking as innocent as a baby deer. Hey, he said, completely unfazed. How'd it go? How'd it go? I slammed his door shut. You got me expelled, you moron. His eyes widened. Wait. Expelled? As in, like, permanently? Yes. As in, I have no school anymore. As in, Mom and Dad are sending me to live with Aunt Karen. Danny blanched. Oh. Oh, wow. Okay. That escalated quickly. I threw my hands in the air. Yeah, no kidding. Danny looked genuinely horrified. For the first time in ever, I saw actual guilt cross his face. Jake, I thought they'd just give you detention or something. I didn't think. Well, you didn't think at all. I was fuming. But the worst part? I could tell he felt awful. And even though I wanted to be mad at him forever, I knew, deep down, that Danny never meant to actually ruin my life. After a long, tense silence, he sighed and said, "I'm gonna fix this." I crossed my arms. "And how exactly are you planning to do that?" "I don't know yet." He stood up, determination in his eyes. "But I will. I promise." I wasn't sure I believed him. But at that moment, I had nothing left to lose. The next day, I woke up to the sound of Danny pacing outside my door. I groaned, pulling my pillow over my head. "If you're looking for forgiveness, try again in the next decade." The pacing stopped. A second later, my door creaked open, and Danny peeked in. He looked like a man on a mission, messy hair, determined eyes, still wearing the same hoodie from yesterday. "I have a plan," he announced. I sat up slowly, my body still heavy with the weight of what happened. "Oh, fantastic. Because your last plan worked out so well." Danny winced but didn't back down. "Okay, I admit, I screwed up. But I can fix it. You just have to trust me." I narrowed my eyes. "Trust you? That's like trusting a raccoon not to tip over a garbage can. Look, do you want to go live with Aunt Karen or not?" I sighed. He had a point. Aunt Karen was an absolute nightmare, the kind of person who sent 14-paragraph-long texts about how disappointed she was in today's youth. If I ended up under her roof, my life would become an endless cycle of awkward family bonding and scrapbooking nights. "Fine," I muttered. "What's the plan?" Danny grinned. "Step 1, we go to school." I blinked at him. "Danny. I got expelled." "Yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't show up." "This is the worst plan I've ever heard." Danny shrugged. Give it a few hours. I'll top it." By the time we arrived at Westwood High, my nerves were shot. Walking into a school that technically no longer considered me a student felt like sneaking into Area 51, except instead of the government, I had to worry about running into Mr. Lawson. Danny, meanwhile, looked completely at ease. "Just play it cool," he whispered as we slipped through the main entrance. "Blend in." I shot him a look. "Danny. I was literally on the morning announcements yesterday. Everyone knows I got kicked out." Details. He waved a hand dismissively. "Trust the process." I didn't trust anything at this point, but I followed him anyway, because what else was I going to do? Go home and start packing for my new life under Aunt Karen's dictatorship? No. I had to at least try. The plan, according to Danny, was simple: we needed to get to Mrs. Patel, the vice principal. She was way more reasonable than Mr. Lawson, and if anyone would listen to our side of the story, it was her. Unfortunately, there was just one problem. "Boys." A deep voice cut through the hallway like an executioner's blade. Danny and I froze. Slowly, painfully slowly, we turned around. And there, standing with arms crossed and an expression colder than an Arctic tundra, was Mr. Lawson. I swallowed hard. Danny blinked up at him. "Hey, Mr. Lawson. You're looking extra authoritative today." I resisted the urge to facepalm. Mr. Lawson raised an eyebrow. "Care to explain why an expelled student is currently roaming my hallways?" Danny took a deep breath. "See, the thing is, we're here on a mission." "Oh, for the love of..." I elbowed him hard before he could say anything worse. "We just need to talk to Mrs. Patel," I said quickly. "Please." Mr. Lawson narrowed his eyes. "Why?" Danny hesitated for a split second, then blurted out, "Because Jake's innocent." The hallway went dead silent. A few passing students slowed their pace, clearly picking up on the drama. Mr. Lawson's gaze flickered between the two of us, unreadable. Then, finally, he exhaled through his nose and muttered, "My office. Now. Welp. So much for blending in." Mr. Lawson's office was as intimidating as ever, lined with shelves full of boring books and decorated with at least 3 posters about respect and integrity. I slumped into a chair, feeling very much like a prisoner awaiting sentencing. Danny, however, looked weirdly confident. Mr. Lawson took his seat across from us, folding his hands on the desk. Talk. Danny wasted zero time. Sir, the email wasn't Jake's fault. I wrote it. I hacked into his account, sent it, and then just hoped for the best. Mr. Lawson's expression didn't change. So you admit to committing academic fraud? Danny hesitated. When you say it like that, it sounds bad. It is bad. Danny cleared his throat. But what I meant to say is, it was a joke. A dumb joke. And I didn't think it would get him expelled. Mr. Lawson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. That may be true, but the fact remains, Jake's email was highly inappropriate. He turned to me. Even if you didn't write it, Jake, it came from your account. That's your responsibility. I sat up straighter. But it wasn't me. I never even saw the email until you called me into your office. How is it fair that I get expelled for something I didn't do? For the first time, Mr. Lawson didn't have an immediate response. Danny pounced on the hesitation like a cat spotting a laser pointer. Sir, I swear, Jake's not a troublemaker. He's never been in serious trouble before. And if you need to punish someone, punish me. Give me detention, suspend me, make me clean all the gum from under the cafeteria tables. I stared at him. Danny, that's disgusting. For justice, Jake. Mr. Lawson rubbed his temples, looking like he regretted every life decision that led him to this moment. Finally, after what felt like forever, he sighed. I need time to consider this. For now, both of you go home. I'll speak with Mrs. Patel and let you know my decision by the end of the day. My heart leaped. That wasn't a no. Danny, however, frowned. You sure you don't want me to clean the gum? I dragged him out of the office before he could make things worse. Back at home, the wait was agony. Every passing hour felt like it was moving in slow motion. I kept checking my phone, waiting for something. Mom and Dad didn't even know we had gone back to school yet. Danny and I agreed it was better to get an answer before updating them. Then, finally, at 5:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A single email from Mr. Lawson. Subject, your status at Westwood High. I took a deep breath and opened it. Jake. After reviewing the situation, Mrs. Patel and I have decided that your expulsion will be revoked. However, you will receive a 2-week suspension for negligence regarding your account security. Danny, on the other hand, will serve 1 month of detention, including cleaning cafeteria gum. See you in 2 weeks. I stared at the screen, barely processing the words. Then, slowly, I turned to Danny. His eyes widened. No. No way. I grinned. Hope you like gum, little brother. The next morning, Danny walked into the kitchen looking like he had aged 10 years overnight. His shoulders slumped, his face was pale, and his entire body language screamed defeat. Mom glanced up from her coffee. You look awful. Danny groaned, flopping onto the counter. That's because I have to spend the next month scraping ancient, fossilized gum off the cafeteria tables. Dad set down his newspaper, raising an eyebrow. Come again? I smirked, enjoying this far more than I should. Oh, didn't we tell you? Danny confessed everything to Mr. Lawson, so now I'm unexpelled. Mom gasped, her eyes lighting up. What? Jake, that's wonderful news. But, I continued, drawing out the word dramatically, Danny is officially Westwood's gum removal technician for the next 4 weeks. Mom's excitement dimmed as she turned to Danny. What exactly did you do? Danny let out a long, pitiful sigh. I may have hacked into Jake's school email and sent an incredibly dumb resignation letter to the principal. Dad blinked. You what? Danny waved a hand. Look, we don't have to dwell on the past. The important thing is, Jake's not expelled, and I took responsibility for my actions. Which is why you'll be spending the next month with a scraper and a bucket, I added cheerfully. Danny shot me a glare. I take back everything I said about saving you. Mom shook her head, clearly torn between being relieved for me and horrified at Danny. We'll talk about this later. For now, Jake, I hope you understand how lucky you are. I nodded. Believe me, I do. Because even though I still had to serve a 2-week suspension, it was infinitely better than getting kicked out entirely. Danny, on the other hand. Well. He was about to embark on a very different kind of educational journey. Later that day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I voluntarily walked into school. Not as a student, I was still suspended, but because I had a front row ticket to Danny's personal nightmare. Westwood's cafeteria was a war zone. Years, decades, of gum had been mashed under tables, creating a multicolored mosaic of horror. Some pieces were so old they had fused with the furniture, becoming part of the very foundation of the school. Danny stood in the middle of it all, holding a tiny plastic scraper and a spray bottle filled with some industrial-strength cleaner. His expression was the purest form of suffering I had ever seen. "Wow," I said, hands in my pockets as I surveyed the damage. "That is, a lot of gum." Danny didn't look at me. "Leave me alone." I crouched next to him, grinning. "You know, this really brings out your best qualities. Humility, patience, a newfound respect for janitors." Danny let out a long, slow exhale. "I swear, when this is over, I'm gonna find a prank so devious, so legendary, that you'll..." Thwack. A particularly stubborn piece of gum snapped off the table, shooting straight into Danny's hair. I choked on laughter as his face twisted in pure horror. "Oh my, it's in my hair. Help. Help me." I pulled out my phone. "This is the best day of my life." Danny flailed wildly, trying to get the gum out while hopping around like a fish out of water. "Jake. Get it out. Right now." I took a fantastic picture instead. Then, finally, I sighed and grabbed a bottle of hand sanitizer from my pocket. "Hold still, you drama queen." After a few minutes of scrubbing and way too much complaining from Danny, we managed to get the gum out. Danny collapsed onto the floor. "This is actual torture." I patted his head. "Hang in there, champ. Only, 29 more days." He groaned. A week later, I was starting to get restless. Suspension wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I got to sleep in, I didn't have to deal with school drama, and I even caught up on some video games I'd been neglecting. But still, 2 weeks of nothing was way too long. I was dying for something, anything, to do. That's when Danny knocked on my door. I looked up from my phone. "What?" He hesitated. "So. I was thinking. Maybe, you want to help me get back at Mr. Lawson?" I frowned. "Danny. You just got me out of trouble. Do you have a death wish?" No, nothing crazy." Danny held up his hands. "Just, a harmless little prank. Nothing that'll get either of us expelled." Again. I stared at him. "Define harmless." He grinned. "One word, balloons." I sighed. "You're never going to change, are you?" Danny smirked. "Not a chance." And, against all logic, I smiled. Because at the end of the day, Danny was still my brother. And honestly, life would be a lot more boring without him. By the time my suspension was over, I had learned 2 important things. 2 weeks of doing nothing sounds great, until you actually experience it. Danny had a deeply concerning amount of free time and zero self-preservation instincts. Because somehow, he had convinced me to help him pull one final prank before he finished his month-long gum-scraping sentence. To be fair, this prank wasn't as stupid as his last one. There were no hacked emails, no resignations, and no risk of me getting expelled, again. Just balloons. Lots and lots of balloons. The plan was simple. Over the course of a week, we would smuggle in as many balloons as possible. We'd sneak into Mr. Lawson's office when he wasn't there. We'd fill it with balloons, like, floor to ceiling, no walking space, absolute chaos levels of balloons. We'd sit back and watch as our grumpy principal tried to fight his way through an ocean of rubber spheres. Harmless. No damage. No crime. Just inconvenience. I'll admit, it was brilliant. Danny and I spent the next week collecting hundreds of balloons. We bought them in bulk, stored them in trash bags, and stashed them in different classrooms, with help from a few amused teachers. By the time the big day arrived, we had exactly 1,000 balloons ready to go. It was go time. That morning, Danny accidentally spilled a smoothie near Mr. Lawson's office door, which forced the janitor to mop up the mess, a classic diversion. While Mr. Lawson was busy supervising the cleanup, we moved in. We worked fast. Balloons flooded the office, bouncing off desks, chairs, and filing cabinets. Some were filled with helium, which made for a nice floating layer, while the rest formed a dense, colorful wall of chaos. By the time we were done, Mr. Lawson's office looked less like an administrative workspace and more like a birthday party gone horribly wrong. Then, we waited. The moment of glory came exactly 10 minutes later. Mr. Lawson walked in. There was a pause. A very long pause. Then, in the most defeated voice I have ever heard, he said, "Why?" Danny and I, standing at a safe distance, could barely hold in our laughter as he tried to wade through the balloons. At one point, he tripped over a chair, disappeared into the chaos, and popped back up like a man who had truly seen the depths of his own despair. It was perfect. And then, miracle of miracles, he started laughing. Not a lot. Not loudly. But it was there. A tiny, amused chuckle that instantly turned into an exhausted sigh. "Danny." He sighed. "Jake." Another sigh. "Both of you." "My office." Now. We weren't technically in trouble. But we weren't not in trouble either. Sitting in Mr. Lawson's balloon-filled office was a surreal experience. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Do I even want to know how many balloons are in here?" Danny grinned. 1,000. Give or take a few. I'm too old for this. Mr. Lawson exhaled slowly, then looked at me. "Jake, your suspension just ended. And yet, here we are." I shifted uncomfortably. In my defense, this was technically Danny's idea. Danny threw his hands up. "Hey! You helped." Mr. Lawson raised an eyebrow. "Should I extend your detention by another month?" Danny's face drained of color. Actually, on second thought, this was all Jake's fault. I was just an innocent bystander. I rolled my eyes. Mr. Lawson sighed again, then did something unexpected. He smiled. Just a little. But it was there. "You two are absolute menaces," he muttered. "But I'll admit. This one was harmless. Annoying, but harmless." Danny beamed. "So, you're saying you won't punish us?" Mr. Lawson stared at him for a very long time. "You're still scraping gum for the rest of the month." Danny groaned. "Fair." Then Mr. Lawson turned to me. "And Jake?" I straightened. "Yes, sir." He sighed. "Just, stay out of trouble. Please." I grinned. "I make no promises." He shook his head, muttering something about retiring early before waving us off. As we left, Danny nudged me. "So, that was kind of a win, right?" I smirked. "Yeah. But enjoy scraping gum for the next 3 weeks." Danny groaned. "Never mention gum to me again." A week later, life was almost back to normal. Danny was still serving his gum-based sentence, but he had officially given up on pranking Mr. Lawson, at least for now. I was back in class, no longer the kid who got expelled. Mom and Dad had mostly forgiven Danny, though Mom still gave him disapproving looks every morning. And, most importantly, Aunt Karen never got the chance to take me in. Which, honestly, that was the biggest win of all. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.